Hey everybody, John Greenwald here with theblackvault.com. So this last week, I got an internal document from the Department of Defense that will likely be of interest to many of you. Now, for those longtime viewers of this channel or those that like to read my articles, you know that I have hammered the Department of Defense spokespeople, namely Susan Goff, but over the years have dealt with about 4 of them, I believe, that has dealt with me on UFOs. A lot of this information, the majority of it, won't be new. But what's interesting is that this is a document that pretty much culminated everything from the past couple of years and put it into one, what they call briefing card. Now, let me go ahead and pull this up here for you guys to see, and I'll go ahead and pull up the document full screen, okay? So this came from the Freedom of Information Act. I got it just this week. It's a unclassified document, so there's no classification to it, but it is an internal record for the Department of Defense, namely the Office of the Secretary of Defense Public Affairs, where they know how to answer questions on any particular topic. They're often referred to as talking points. Now, over the years, not just on UFOs, I've gone after talking points, and those are the internal, again, approved statements that if newscaster X, Y, or Z presses the spokesperson for a particular answer, what happens is they literally will sometimes read the answer, or they will have it memorized, and depending upon the skill set of that spokesperson, you know, it's generally one of those two. But those are the approved talking points. And for those who aren't aware, generally the hot topic issues, UFOs included, but across the board, Afghanistan, the bombing by ISIS-K, I mean, all of that, they go through a careful review process for approved statements. But they don't just release these generally. There are exceptions, but they generally don't release these to the public, right? So they keep them internally and keep them only if the media asks the question. So it could be unclassified, but that doesn't mean they just, you know, pass these out as pamphlets to the press corps. Rather, they keep it close to the vest and only give those statements when they are asked. So this is the UAP internal briefing card for the report that came out, the UAP report that didn't come out until June. But obviously internally, they were planning for that. So the press corps and all of the media people, they were obviously going to have a heck of a lot of questions. And so what they did was they created this internal card. One thing I did not write about on the site, which will be unique to this video, is that this was not just for OSD. OSD actually forwarded this out to multiple agencies. In one specific case that I can vouch for, NASA received it. So OSD, although creates it for the DoD, right? So the Pentagon spokespeople likely prepared it, and you'll see here at the bottom, prepared by, and it's classified, or excuse me, not classified. It's redacted. It's exempted, so it's not classified information. This is likely Susan Goff. So she prepared these because she essentially wrote most of these lines. And going back to my statement where some of you who have read my material over the last few years, some of these are going to sound really familiar. But let me go through some of them because one stuck out that I think that you guys will I think find intriguing, and I can argue both ways of why they said this. But let me go ahead and let me read a couple lines here. Public and news media interest in unidentified aerial phenomena remains high. DoD formally established a UAP task force per the fiscal year 2019 NDAA on August 4th, 2020. The Senate Select Committee on Intelligence report attached to the fiscal year 21 Intelligence Authorization Act, signed into statute as part of the Omnibus Spending Bill signed on December 27, 2020. These are mouthfuls. Directed the Director of National Intelligence in consultation with the Secretary of Defense to submit a report to Congress on UAPs within 180 days of enactment. The SSCI report specifically mentions the UAPTF. Recently, which was in March, John Ratcliffe, former DNI, spoke with Fox News about the report, generating multiple queries asking for DoD comment on his claims in the interview. CBS 60 Minutes aired a segment on May 16th on DoD's efforts to examine UAPs. So I wanted to read that to you guys just to get an idea. This is what they called the executive summary of what they were dealing with. And these were all of the talking points. I'm going to read some to you. We are aware of the report requirement, and the UAPTF team is actively working with the Office of Director of National Intelligence on the report. I refer you to ODNI for anything else regarding the report. So when you read these, imagine a spokesperson talking to the press corps. That's what this is all about. Here's another one. We take reports of incursions into our airspace by any aircraft, identified or unidentified, very seriously and investigate each one. They've used that line for a couple years now. Safety of our personnel and security of our operations are of paramount concern. Another one that has been duplicated many times over. To protect our people, maintain operational security, and safeguard intelligence method, we do not publicly discuss the details of the UAP observations or the task force or examinations. Essentially, they've shut this down. And this is the proof. This is the proof that they are closing the door moving forward on giving the public information about their investigations into UAPs, details about UAPs, UAP cases, and so on. So what does that mean? Well, for me, I say challenge accepted, because I will go after those documents and those files regardless. But they are trying to give the aura that what they are doing with the UAP topic is classified. Now, in these briefing cards, they also have the Q&As. So this is something that what they call the top line messages. These are what they probably will more freely give out. You know, so if you watch Jen Psaki at the White House and she's talking about, you know, whatever subject at hand, I'll use the ISIS-K attack. She'll kind of give some you know, like a rundown of maybe some stats or some details or updates or whatever. That's generally the top line. And then she'll open up to Q&A. And she'll say, okay, can you get, you know, whomever, CNN, and then CNN will ask. And let's say they start asking these types of questions, and these are references for the spokespeople to refer to. This is the one that I think most of you will find the most fascinating. Has the department found any evidence of extraterrestrial technology? The answer, approved answer. The examinations into incursions by UAPs are still ongoing. The department does not comment on intelligence matters. Here is the main reaction that I've seen from the general public since I posted this just days ago. They didn't say no. So for me, I try and remove myself because I do find that interesting. They didn't say, you know, we can't definitively say no, but we find no, you know, evidence of it or what. They just don't even comment on it. Is that important? And to be honest with you, I can argue it both ways, and I'm not sure. So I will take your comments, put them on this video. Feel free to comment below and let me know why you think they didn't. In my personal opinion, I lean towards when they don't comment on something, they don't comment on something and they leave it at that. And that if the question was, you know, Mrs. Spokeswoman, are these intelligent ants that have grown to 5 foot in length? You know, will they say no? Well, probably, but in the same respect, will they just not comment? No matter what you throw at them, no matter what definition you have, will they say no comment? So, you know, the mega giant ant thing may be kind of stupid and silly to use as an example, but what I'm trying to say is no matter what descriptor, no matter what definition that you put on it, if the going line is do not talk about it, then the answer is we don't talk about it. But they didn't say no. And I know that a lot of people from the readership that I've seen when I first published this just days ago really felt that that was the most important. Here's a couple other ones. Do you have any comment on the remarks made by John Ratcliffe to Fox News? The official line, as he was the former DNI and ODNI has led on the UAP report, I refer you to ODNI. So whenever they can, they push you to somewhere else. Why they did the UAPTF is pretty standard. Why did the Navy change its reporting guidelines on UAPs? Here's their answer. We are using a data-driven approach. Sometimes there are phenomena for which we don't have sufficient data. We wanted to establish an environment where our force feels comfortable reporting all observations so we can collect data, make informed determinations, and address our findings. UAPTF, did it find anything thus far? And here it is again. We don't comment on intelligence matters. Why can't you tell us anything about UAPs? The official answer: DoD does not provide information about operational or intelligence activities that would identify possible U.S. vulnerabilities. I'm kind of curious what vulnerabilities they're discovering, other than the obvious, that they're being encroached upon by something that they can't identify or stop. So that was a little bit telling. Again, nothing new, but telling nonetheless. What budget does the UAPTF have? Answer: as the lead agency, the U.S. Navy identifies and uses appropriated defense funding to meet UAPTF requirements. So in other words, they're not telling you. Additional background information not for release. Except for its existence and the mission/purpose, virtually everything else about the UAPTF is classified per the signed Security Classification Guide. I've mentioned this once before, and I'll mention it again in this video. On a hunch, in January, I have gone after this Security Classification Guide, and it was not revealed to exist until about, I think it was about 2 months later, that I got some emails, and Joseph Gradisher, who is a Navy spokesperson, I'm kind of going from memory on the chronology, so it may not be exactly 2 months, but it was after January that the Security Classification Guide was revealed. Why is that important? And in essence, that SCG will outline essentially everything about the security and classification on UAPs. The why, the how, what are they going to do? How do they lock this down? And it's kind of an interesting thing to have been revealed that all of that was worked out already. So my FOIA is still open, the case to get that SCG. I'm hoping that I'll get it, sometime by the end of my life, but who knows with some of this stuff. But this was a very interesting paragraph also, that again, in an unclassified document, they still had stuff not for release. I am surprised that this wasn't stamped for official use only, but who knows? There's all sorts of quirky things. So anyway, going through, I won't go through and make this a 12-hour video going through every line, but I invite you to look at the link below, download the document, and see internally all of the approved talking points. But one thing else that I wanted to point out is the bracketed points here. So there's all these ifs, like, well, if they push you on this, or if this happens, answer this way. So here's a couple of them. If asked about announcing the UAPTF without further public discussion, the answer: we want the American public to be aware of the Department of Defense's efforts to preserve national security. We will continue to share what we can about the program as appropriate. Let me pull in one of the chat room questions as I go through here. Rather be squidding, thank you so much for that. If you are not aware, I am starting to broadcast some of these in raw form for you all to take part. So if you're watching this video and it's not live, then make sure you subscribe to the channel, because next time you can get your question in on the essentially the live or behind the scenes video, which I started to do for fun. That way you can take part in getting your question answered. So Rather, thank you so much for that support. How often and when, if all, do you think this briefing card would be updated? Fantastic question, Rather, and I don't have an answer to it, but I can tell you what I'm doing to find that out. So as we know, and I'll come back to this point, as we know that this particular card was May 17th, 2021. This particular document, this version, came out in a FOIA case that may not have included all of the briefing cards that they've created, if any others exist. Before I publish this publicly, I have already filed a new case that would yield every single version and every single, we'll call it variation. Now, I'm careful using the word draft, although draft versions of this could exist as well. The problem in the FOIA is that draft versions are exempt generally. So for the most part, they can exempt, let's say there's 5 draft versions of this document here. If the number 1 through 4 were considered draft form and this is final, 1 through 4 would be exempted. 5 is released according to my request. But what I don't know, and this is what I'm kind of fishing for with FOIA, it's a fishing expedition sometimes. This was the briefing card for the UAP report to Congress. Now, some of these points dealt with the UAPTF or Luis Elizondo, which I'll get to in a minute, ATIP, John Ratcliffe, which was timely at the time this was written, a couple other things. Is there a briefing card solely on the UAPTF? Is there a briefing card solely on the Luis Elizondo / ATIP, we'll call it controversy? All of which were dealt with in part in this, but that doesn't mean or take away from the reality there may be briefing cards on all of that. So my case is going after all of that. My new one, I should say, will go after all of that to answer that question. Is this going to be updated? Likely not, only because this was pre-UAP reports published. This ship has sailed, so to speak, but that doesn't mean that they don't have something else. That, again, briefing card solely on UAPs as a phenomena, as a whole. And then they have a list of questions and so on and so forth. So all of that could be true, and we don't have the answer, but it's a great question, rather, and thank you for that. Let me go back down here. Get this off the screen. So back to these sections here where they were like, if you're pressed. Here is where they dealt with Mr. Luis Elizondo. If asked about the role of former DoD employee Luis Elizondo in the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, their answer, Luis Elizondo had no assigned responsibilities for ATIP while assigned to OUSDI. That is incredibly controversial. There will probably be in the live, for those joining the live version, chats messages regarding that all across the board. The problem is that we don't, I hate to say it this way, we don't have a final determination on that. The key here is no assigned responsibilities. This word was added later, assigned. I know I will get heat for saying that this is not a settled issue. It's just not. There's no, yes, I know about the Harry Reid letter. Yes, I know about the controversy. And yes, I know about the flip-flopping on the side of the Pentagon. I know all that. But what I'm looking for is that solidified proof. And if this keyword here, assigned, means something, I believe there's more to the story. Now, does that mean that Mr. Elizondo is lying? No, that's not what this means. Does that mean that this is highly controversial and people will partly support pushing that question while the other part will throw things at me? Absolutely. That is very true. But what's interesting that despite everything that has happened, right, everything that has been revealed, even the reality of the Pentagon flip-flopping on their statements, they have stood true to that statement. Why? Why don't they just flip like they did on a couple other things? They didn't quite flip as many times as some people have claimed, but they have flip-flopped. I've written articles specifically on that. So why are they still in May of this year holding true to that and holding true to this? If asked whether the UAPTF is a continuation of ATIP, the relationship between UAPTF and ATIP, the UAPTF is not a continuation of ATIP, since the majority of reporting about UAP observation in recent years came from naval aviators. The Department of the Navy has been leading assessments of UAP incursions into DoD training ranges and designated airspace since approximately 2018. Beginning in 2019, DoD undertook efforts to formalize the good work done by the Navy for DoD. Former Deputy Secretary Norquist approved the establishment of the UAPTF on August 4th. If asked about ATIP, and this is more what I was referring to, the purpose of the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, or ATIP, was to investigate foreign advanced aerospace weapon system applications with future technology projections over the next 40 years, and to create a center of expertise for advanced aerospace technologies. The goal was to help understand the threat posed by unconventional or leap-ahead aerospace vehicles and technologies that could have national security implications for the United States. That's a line that they've touted for years. They continue to deny that it was a UFO research program, but now they have said that they utilized UFO reports in ATIP, whatever that means. So at the bottom line is, it's fascinating when you put all of this on a chronological timeline. That's my overall point. That there are many who are arguing that the DODIG, the Inspector General, now is involved. Luis Elizondo's complaint is in. I tried to get that complaint through FOIA. It was exempted, so I was denied. I hope it does get released, because I'd love to see that even if the names are removed. You know, I'd love to see what the complaint truly was. Because if he's fighting to counter this statement, which is great, I encourage him to do so, why are they still touting it? Granted, this was May, and things you know, that the complaint was in around this time. I forget the exact date, but there should be enough time for there to be other, let's call it, amendments or changes to documents such as these. However, even well post this document's creation, the Pentagon has told me the same line about Mr. Elizondo. In fact, in a legal FOIA appeal, not even the case, but the appeal, where my next step would be to take the Navy to court, I used Mr. Elizondo's testimony that he had given in public to counter and appeal the final decision of a case. I won't go into great detail about that because it's still open, but that portion of my appeal was denied and essentially discounted. The citation in their very long denial letter was that they do not believe that Mr. Elizondo had any role in ATIP. Ergo, his testimony was not, we'll call it legally admissible, but it wasn't the courts. That's my next step. So forgive the phrasing, because this wasn't a court proceeding. But essentially, they discounted it, and that was the citation at the bottom of the letter. So some people think I'm hounding on this and beating the dead horse. It has no bearing on what I believe or not believe. In the eyes of the legal cases that I fight and that I write appeals on and try and get records, that is why these types of things are important. And that's why I keep bringing stuff like this up, because we have to deal with it eventually. You know, we need that verifiable proof for people like me, and me specifically, to take that into a legal FOIA appeal or into the courts. That would be my step number 3. You go FOIA case, FOIA appeal, and then judicial review. So I need that. But if they're discounting it, that's why all of this is important, and that's why these internal documents all help tell that story. So it's very important. Again, it doesn't matter if you believe it or not. It's important nonetheless, because if there is any hope for some of this material to get out, it will likely be through not only the Freedom of Information Act, but the appeal process and potentially the courts. And if that is true, then we have to get beyond this type of stuff, get the proper evidence, and move on. And so that's why I have beaten that dead horse. Not because I'm a meanie and not because it's fun for me. It's not. But from a legal standpoint, we have to deal with it, regardless of where you sit. So that is the talking point UAP report briefing card from the DOD. The video went on a little bit longer than I thought, but hopefully that gives you guys a bit of an understanding about how those documents work, why they are written, why they exist. And even though it was really cool to see the UAP report, going back to Rather's question, Do others exist? Are they updating this? What else is there? And I'm happy to say that there's a FOIA case which may reveal just that. And when it does, you know I'll come right at you on this channel with a new video. And with that said, thank you guys for taking part in this and for your questions. As always, please, please give me a thumbs up. It always helps the channel. That is the biggest way that you can spread the word, is make sure you give the thumbs up, subscribe, and share with your friends and family if you feel so inclined. There's a Patreon link in the description below, along with other links to download this document and much more. Thank you so much. This is John Greenwald Jr. signing off, and we'll see you next time.